This simple strategy will blow up your chess. It brought me and my students hundreds of ELO points, and now it's your turn. I'm gonna play against Sophia here and demonstrate my strategy to you. First, we need a very simple opening. I'm gonna play this d6 universal defense. It works against absolutely everything. You don't care against whom you're playing, against what opening you're playing. It works every time. By the way, I have a full opening course based on this opening. You can build a holistic lifetime opening repertoire both for white and black, all inside of one course. Right now, you have an amazing offer. On top of that, a full month of live coaching with me included. The link would be in the description. Check out this amazing offer before it's gone. So all you need to remember here is that you place your pawn on d6, and then whenever you can, you make the move e5. Here, I can do it immediately because nobody is stopping me. In general, I want you to focus on the ideas, not to memorize the openings till move 20, 30. It's not going to help you because your opponent under 2000 is going to play some nonsense. By the way, we are going to play against Sophia here, 2300 rated bot. Would be very instructive to demonstrate all of our ideas. Simple opening, you always keep an eye on the move that your opponent is making, what kind of threats it creates, and then what is the most active way to deal with it. For example, here, that would be just taking this pawn on d4. If the knight of my opponent is not there, I can always take. Any other piece it takes with is not a problem for me. For example, the queen, because I'm going to be able to develop my knight here to c6 with the tempo. This is the second step of our strategy. Very simple strategy, just two steps. First, simple opening that we have here and that you can learn in full details thanks to my one in all opening course. And second, create as many threats for your opponent as possible, like this move knight c6. But be careful. You do not want to play hope chess when you make a ridiculous move just to hope for your opponent to blunder something. No, instead we do something useful for ourselves and at the same time create a threat for our opponent. Let's continue. We want to develop our pieces as fast as possible. To achieve that, we just follow the golden principle: one piece, one move. Don't waste any time, any unnecessary moves with your pieces. I want you to have a very good reason behind every single one of your moves. When I analyze games with my students, I often ask, why on earth do you make this move? And they say, I don't know. Well, I want you to never ever answer that, to always have a very concrete reason why you have made that move or another one. It can be a wrong reason. That's completely fine. You're learning. It's okay. I also make lots of mistakes, much more than I wish I would make. But I always want you to have a reason behind the moves that you're making. All right. Very important in chess, probably the most important one, is to focus on your opponent. What he wants to achieve. Every single time your opponent makes a move, you might have a lot of ideas, for example, to play knight d7 here. But you stop all of that and think, what is the threat? In this case, it's very obvious he wants to deliver a checkmate in one. So you cannot just play h6 and tell him, get out of it. No, you always think, what is the threat? To help you understand, find all of these threats, you can use the CCTA system: checks, captures, threats, and active moves. But frankly, the first two are enough to figure out most of the problems for you. Checks and captures, checks and captures. Queen takes f7 is both a capture and a check, and this is huge. And again, when we are thinking how can we deal with it, we think in terms of the most active opportunity for ourselves. Remember, we want to make an active move, develop our piece like this move knight f6, and at the same time deal with our problem. The passive move would be f6, for example. That would be reacting mode, when we are just dealing with our opponent's threat without actually doing something useful for ourselves. Instead, we do not want to waste any time. So we basically combine that, we develop a new piece and say, well, we wanted to develop the knight anyway. The fact that you brought your queen to f4, the knight to g5 to just actually play this hope chess. That is exactly that. It's just wasting your time. And time is the most important resource in chess. This is how this strategy absolutely doesn't work. Okay, queen e3. Again, we think about the threats. In this case, it's a check. I think there is no problem with playing queen to e7 and going into the endgame. We are completely ready for it because knight e5, unfortunately, well, maybe it's actually even possible. I thought it loses the knight because they play f4, but because we have such a huge advantage, in terms of the development, might actually get away with it. Like queen e4, we have, yeah, still some difficulties. Bishop f5, this pawn on b7. Yeah, that's too complicated. Let's ignore all of that and play normal, reasonable, developing moves. We are bringing a new piece into the game, at the same time dealing with our opponent's threat. That is exactly what we need. Yes, they take it. Now we just need to decide whether we take with the king or with the knight. Normally, we always want to take forward, not backwards. Knight takes a7 would be a second move with the same piece first, and second it would be a move backwards. We don't want to make those moves. And don't be afraid without the queens to leave your king in the center. We castle exactly for a reason that we are afraid to get checkmated, and that is a reasonable fear. But without the queens, it's basically impossible to get checkmated. So you don't want to waste your time, and in this case, taking with the king makes sense. Our opponent is continuing being as active as possible, which is good. He creates threats, but at the same time, he wastes so much time. He's incredibly passive. Like, these two knights are great, but everything else had never moved. I mean, you cannot play like that. A lot of lower-rated players are making this exact mistake, and that is why they miserably lose. Now, I want you to know how to deal with it, right? Because you don't want to lose miserably because of that. I would just say we ignore this pawn and instead focus on our development and play bishop f5. How do you understand whether you can or cannot sacrifice a pawn? One pawn is roughly worth 2 tempi. So my opponent played knight b5 to attack this guy. Then he's gonna take it. I'm gonna attack, by the way, develop a new piece. And he's gonna need to make a third move with the same piece. So that is 3 tempi he exchanges for 1 pawn. This is too much. I know that it's going to be great for me, so I'm not afraid to lose that pawn. Because he understands, okay, I cannot continue like that, I'm in total trouble. He tries to develop some pieces, even at the cost of this pawn, but this is a central pawn. I'm happy to take it. By the way, this is an exception worth making. The only situation where I make the second move with the same piece, because I'm grabbing a pawn. That is a very good reason to do that. If you don't have a very good reason, please never make a second move with the same piece you have already developed. All right, knight takes. Again, taking back a piece is a good enough reason to make a second move with the bishop. Still, he can take that pawn, but I'm once again ready to just play that move rook c8. All right, f3. Yes, he's winning some time, but he also creates some weaknesses. I'm still coming with my... okay, he even plays g4. Yeah, that cannot be good to open. I understand without the queens it's not that dangerous, but still. Bishop e6. Maybe bishop e6 was not the best, because now he's gonna take it when he's gonna come with the knight. Anyway, the advantage in terms of... oops, don't lose your pieces like that. The advantage in terms of the pieces development is overwhelming. He's not going to be able to develop everything because I'm already creating all of those threats. And this bishop on g7 is so powerful. Like, yes, he can play bishop g5 check, but then who's gonna protect that pawn on b2? Not doing that, but now I can just attack everything with knight e5. This is how you use the power of your development. It's not going to be there forever, so you have to take advantage of that before your opponent is able to deal with it. Again, I can take the pawn here, but what is even better is to finish my development and create yet another threat, even multiple threats, because the f3 pawn is hanging, the g4 pawn is hanging, and now all of my pieces are developed, whereas none of my opponent's pieces are developed. This is actually the best possible case scenario you can have in chess. Of course, not every time it works, but this is how you take advantage of your opponent making those stupid hope chess moves. Now I have a pleasant choice which pawn I take. I like to take this g4 pawn because that's gonna make sure that those pawns are isolated and I'm gonna attack it afterwards. Very, very nice. Yeah, my knight is hanging. Every time your opponent makes a move, think what is the threat. Don't assume he's just going away with the king and nothing has changed. No, this pawn is not pinned anymore, so my knight is hanging. I go backwards, again attacking this guy on c4. Bishop g5 check. Finally he develops that, but just king to d7. The king in the center is out of the danger completely. There are no queens. Maybe it helps, yeah, now he can at least play b3 and defend that guy on c4, and his rook is protected by the second rook. That was smart, but I'm still a pawn up. Maybe it's time for me to relocate my knight to d4, where it's going to be super powerful. Can even play e5 to support it if needed. And there it's going to attack both the bishop and the pawn on f3. Let me do that. Also block the d file. So you see how important it is to dealing with your opponent's threats and doing something useful for yourself. Yes, I have spent too tempe to do that, but I did it only in a situation where all of my pieces are developed. This is the key difference. Once that is the case, if you don't know what to do, how to improve your position, just ask yourself, what is my worst placed piece? And then try to improve it. Now I feel like my rook on c8 is not super optimized. Maybe I can just bring it to f5. But, as always, I have to be careful with my opponent's ideas. If I play rook c5 immediately, he plays bishop to... Well, even that is fine. Bishop to e3, I can take on e2. He takes... no, that is not fine. The more pieces that are hanging in your camp, the more vulnerable your position becomes, the more risky it gets, the higher the chances you're going to blunder something. To avoid that, you can always play simple. Just knight takes e2, he has to take back, and then we have the situation with the same color as bishops, where I'm a pawn up. It's always great for me, and now I can continue my plan. Although maybe he has this rook e1 idea, which is a little bit annoying. Then I'm going to start with bishop d4, so that if he plays rook e1, I'm going to play e5, support that bishop, and everything is fully protected. Rook d1, the same stuff, unless he can sacrifice. No, he can't. This is the advantage. If there are no queens on the board, it's almost never possible to create some checkmate attack. Yes, if he takes on d4, he's going to have one check, but this is not a big deal. f4. This is more serious, because if my king is pinned there, that might be a problem. But I can just avoid that by going away with my king to c6. And then the pawn and the bishop are protecting each other very well. Or, no, I couldn't take it, right, because of rook e7 check, and then my bishop would be hanging. Yeah, how do you decide if you take with the bishop or with the pawn? You always want to take forward. If a move forward works, in most of the cases, this is your option, and only if it doesn't work, you start considering moves backwards. In this case, it works, so I'm going to take the pawn. And that also creates a passer. In the endgame, you always want to create a passer, and once you do create it, you look for ways to push it forward. Right now, it's still not the case, but hopefully it's going to change in the future. I also have an extra pawn here, but so far I wasn't able to use it. I want to change that. Again, I ask myself, what is my worst placed piece? That is definitely this rook on c8, so I want to improve it. I play rook f5, and then I want to bring the second rook to the f-file, double along the f-file, and create problems for my opponent. But yeah, plays that, attacking my stuff, which is pretty annoying. I think it's so annoying that I have to change my plan. So he's attacking the bishop. And that is a huge threat. He's going to win a pawn. But if I take it, then I have this isolated pawn. Maybe I haven't underestimated my opponent's plan. Obviously, the position is still great for me, but I have to react the right way. I'm going to play rook to d8, so that I can protect my bishop, avoid any troubles. Yeah, rook d2, that is possible, but I hoped that I can even play king to c5. He plays b4, I'm going to just take on c4. And otherwise, I'm protecting that guy. If he takes, I'm always ready to take. Yes, here I can even play a5, respectively. Let's do that. Just very important to remain solid, to watch out for your opponent's threats, not to allow him to deliver some very dangerous counterplay. I have lost thousands of my games because I missed some counterplay from my opponent. Hopefully you are not going to do that. Every single time he makes a move, ask yourself, what is this threat? All right, now I feel like I want to improve my rook on f5 because now this one is doing nothing. How can I do that? Maybe just rook f7 and rook d7. Rook f6, notice it's not going to be possible because he can just play bishop g5. You might be wondering, what is this magic board I use in my videos? It's called Chess Not Evo. And I enjoy it so much, I have it for a year now. It completely transformed the way I play chess and I train chess, because I can play both on Chess and chess.com online, but on a real board. It's a completely different experience and I enjoy it a lot. I haven't had any major issues, and that's my favorite product from Chessnut because I have everything in one place. I have my books here, I have my studies here, I have my games, but they have so many different products according to your needs and your budget. The best part is, of course, you can use the link in the description as well as the promo code journeytograndmaster to get a big discount on all Chessnut products. Now, back to video. I can play a4 maybe, and saying I'm not afraid of anything at all. But first, yeah, let's start with the rook. Let's improve pieces first before doing anything active. This is a very good strategy. I promised you that we always want to create as many threats for the opponent. Well, in a situation where we are a pawn up, normally our opponent or some material up, our opponent has to prove that he has some compensation for this pawn. Otherwise, we are just gonna destroy him. So that's what happens on the board. But also, of course, we want to create those threats if possible. But I realized maybe he can play bishop g5 now and just try to repeat moves, but I would play rook a8 and prepare that move a4 anyway. Okay, now that we have optimized our pieces, maybe we can play rook to d6. That would create a real threat of finally taking that bishop. Let's do that. As the rook is protected by the king, b4 is still not a problem, we take everything. Bishop g5, right, and now rook 8 to d7. Yeah, also stopping his threat bishop e7. Always and always thinking what are the threats your opponent is creating. Yeah, now we can finally deal with the d file. Maybe just bishop c3. Exchanging a pair of rooks would help. One thing is, you don't want to blunder rook takes, bishop e7. Very, very important to watch out for your opponent's threats. We can also just play a4 anyway. Yeah, I think that is the most instructive thing, because that's going to improve our pawn structure. If he takes, he's going to have those double pawns, very bad. And we are going to have a very good square on d5 to hide our king. I think that would be tremendous. Then we are going to have different options. We can start attacking that a pawn. We can start pushing our central pawn. Yeah, for example, here we can just play... now I understand the point. If you play rook a6, you can play rook takes e5 thanks to this spin. So, never ever ignore your opponent's threat. Doesn't matter how great your move is. Whenever your opponent makes a move, stop everything and think, what is the threat for me? And whenever you're about to make your move, like this rook a6, just try to think, what could be my opponent's response, and always start with the most active moves. Checks and captures, checks and captures. Rook a5 is a capture, which is very annoying. So, to avoid all of the troubles, I start with the move king to d5. Now everything is protected here. The less vulnerable pieces you have, the better it gets. And I'm ready to just attack my opponent. I don't think he has... Yeah, he does have ideas like bishop f6 and then attacking, but come on. My rook is still covering the 6th rank, so it's not possible for now. Otherwise, I don't see anything active he can do. Rook d3. Yes, I can just grab a pawn. That also creates some discovered checks. Now he can play bishop f6. But okay, I have king c4, multiple moves. King f3 to avoid the problem alone in this file, but now it's time to improve my second rook. You always want to make all of your pieces as active as possible. That is true in the opening, where you just try to develop it, but the same applies to the middle game and into the end game. You don't want any unemployment going on in your camp. Every single piece should have a useful function, useful job to perform. This rook is attacking the pawn, this rook is controlling the open file, everything works, this is great. I think we even are able to play e4 now. Yeah, I think it's time to go forward. Remember, I was telling you someday we are gonna find a way to improve, to use our passer to go forward. And hopefully the time has come. Yeah, there are some disadvantages to it, because now it's a little bit less solid. Maybe rook c4 immediately was better. But we can still do it now. Rook c4. If rook to b5, we can either step back or play just bishop c5. I think everything works. Yeah. Maybe rook f2 check was better first. Stop that. But I just didn't want to leave my rook without to leave my b7 pawn without protection. By the way, to solve that problem, we can simply play the move b6. Right, now it's all about me making some progress. Or maybe at some point, just exchanging a pair of rooks can help. Because I do have 2 extra pawns, that is a very nice advantage. I don't really like this spin. Maybe I can deal with it somehow. Maybe just playing king to c5 or something. Stopping rook to b5 check, stopping all sorts of problems along the file. Maybe even getting ready for e3 or rook f3 or some active things. For example, here, rook to f. Yeah. In the end of the day, I'm not winning the a3 pawn because of this bishop e7. So always and always keep an eye on your opponent's ideas. This is so crucial. For example, here, my pawn is hanging, and that is quite annoying. Maybe that was the wrong way for my king to go. Maybe I should have played king to e5, where the king would be not in trouble. Yeah, let's do that. It's always fine to repeat the position once. You see what kind of intentions your opponent has. You may win some time if you're in a time trouble. Now let's play king to e5. Because I control this f4 and f6 squares, so that the bishop cannot go there. It can go to e3, but in such a situation, exchanging cannot be bad for me. Do I have a better option? Probably not. Probably I also don't need it. My king is better than my opponent's. I have extra material, so exchanging stuff is very good. I must take it back. And now I have to decide whether I also want to play rook s3 and exchange a pair of rooks. Probably I won't. This is the simplest. You want to simplify the position as much as possible if you have a lot of material advantage. 2 pawns is normally enough in all kinds of situations. There are, of course, exceptions. Chess is a game of exceptions, but normally if you have 2 extra pawns, you are happy to exchange as many pieces as possible. Well, I lose this pawn, but I also get one of the pawns back immediately. Probably this pawn on h4, as now I have 2 connected passers. This is a beautiful situation to find yourself in. Rook b2. Yeah, let's play rook h3. Or maybe rook a4. No, rook a4 is not that clear, because he has rook b5, and then he takes with the check. So let's make sure we win those 2 pawns. King g4 is the most active move. And yes, he's gonna have a few checks, but again, with 2 extra pawns, we don't really care. Enough is enough. But it's still very instructive. It's never too late. The move is not making for some reason. It's never too late to spoil your game in chess. So let me show you how you take advantage of those 2 extra pawns. Basically, you want to push it forward, but stop your opponent from winning it. I think I can just play h5. This is the most active move. He could have played rook b5 check, but then I wanted just to play king f6, king g7, king to h6 if needed, and start pushing the pawns. Right, now my pawn is hanging. My plan was to play rook to a4 check. If he goes king g5, just rook g4 check, and he has to push his king backwards, and then my pawn is free to go. Or he can do that, but now I can either bring my rook to g4 to defend the pawn, or just play king f5. Which one is better? Probably it kind of leads to the same thing, but rook g4 feels a little bit more active. It gives me more freedom. King f3. Yeah, I just need to make sure that I have a place to hide with my king. Probably it's the h4 square. I really like it for my king, so I'm gonna go that direction. Rook to b5 check. Play king f6, and then if it's another check, I'm ready to go to g5 and to h4. Rook b6, king g5, exactly. It's still not easy, but if I 100% know that the endgame is winning, then I just go for it. I don't need to think about anything else. So now that my king is there, I'm ready to go forward, and that's funny, a nice trap for our chess.com bot opponent. If I play g5, which seems to be a move we want to make, he has rook h2 check, and that's a checkmate. Which leads me to this very important point: never ever make your move without thinking what your opponent can do, and always start with checks and captures. g5, rook h2 would be a pity, but instead I can always start with a check. Remember, you use checks and captures and threats not only for your opponent but also for yourself. That is the most active move. Now there is nothing stopping me from playing g5. Rook h2 check, I can even play king to g4. King f5, well, in that case, I'm happy to cut the king so that it's not a problem for me. I can just freely move my pawn forward. Okay, goes this way. Well, it's reasonable because rook h2 might be a threat, but actually it never works if the king is behind. I can just block it with the rook. So I'm gonna play g4. Once you create the passer, you should be looking for ways to push it forward. Ah, okay, that is the idea. Okay, he wins a pawn, but again, if the king is cut from behind, one pawn is always enough, it just promotes into the queen. There is nothing he can do about it. Can just move my king. Somewhere like f2 would be a beautiful square. By the way, I had a very similar situation in my tournament game recently. So either king to h3, threatening to play g2, or king to f4. King to f4 doesn't create a threat, so for that reason, let's choose king to h3. Rook h5, now king there. We even want to play king to f1 or king to f2, okay, doesn't matter. And promote our pawn. If rook c5, yeah, he wants to create a few checks. Okay, what is a smart way to stop that? Maybe just king to h2, so that if he plays rook h5, we now have king to g1 and then g2. If he plays rook to c1, to c2, we have g2 directly. All right. To c5, finally g2. To d5. What do we do? Probably king f2. The king is behind, it can never stop the pawn, so we use that to our advantage. In g3. g1, rook f1, we block it, and now we are ready to promote our queen. He can give a few checks, but we just go away with the king. Stop the checks, and then we are ready to promote. Let me deliver a checkmate very fast for you. Here's exactly how you beat your opponent thanks to this simple strategy. Don't forget to take advantage of the amazing offer you currently have. The link would be in the description. You can build a full lifetime opening repertoire both for white and black and get a full month of live coaching with me included completely for free. And in this playlist, you can learn more about this amazing opening, how you can use it to crush anyone as black.